Hey, if you're a traveling senior that's 65 years of age and older, which Medicare health plan is going to be best for you, a Medicare Advantage or Medicare Supplement? In this episode, I'm going to be walking you through exactly what plan is best for those that are traveling around the U.S. and abroad. Stick around, I'll be back in just a second. Hey, if you're 65 years of age and older and you travel often, especially if you're going to the other states in the union, or if you're beyond the states and you're going out of the country, I'm going to cover exactly what it means to be covered inside of the U.S. And then also, what do you need to do when you travel abroad outside of the United States? We're going to start with Medicare Advantage plans. A lot of the population now, about 52% of seniors are enrolled into some form of Medicare Advantage plan. I'm going to break down with you exactly how coverage works beyond your network. I'm going to start with HMO plans, and HMO plans typically in metro areas, and often you hear me say this on videos that I communicate about Medicare Advantage plans. If you live in a metro area, like we live in right outside of the Nashville areas where our office is located, in the metro Nashville market, within about 60 miles of Nashville, middle center point of Nashville, you're going to find that the networks for Medicare Advantage plans are very good and very robust plans that are available. Most of the major carriers, what was Cigna now is HealthSpring, Humana, United Healthcare. There's probably about 5 main Medicare Advantage plans that are in the metro Nashville area or surrounding up to about 60 miles out, have very good networks when it comes to a huge list of primary care doctors that are part of each of those main carriers, specialists, hospitals. There are some fractured situations with hospitals. Sometimes we do have a couple carriers that are not in network with, like Vanderbilt, but in general, if you go around metro areas in the Orlando, Florida area, if you go in Dallas, Texas, if you look around metro large city areas, Medicare Advantage plans a lot of times will have great networks. So with that being said, we typically will guide people to an HMO Medicare Advantage plan because the copay is going to be less. The specialist copays, the hospitalization copays, the copays in general are going to be less on HMO model Medicare Advantage plans. If your doctor, specialists, and medications are covered, you're going to find a lot of times, even with the HMO plans, because they don't have an out-of-network cost share with like a PPO plan, that HMO plan is going to have better pricing. And a lot of times what we're seeing is with the Inflation Reduction Act, the HMO plan actually has better formulary options. And formularies we'll talk about a little bit in the changing landscape of what's going on in formularies in a second. So HMO plans. So in network, if you have an urgent care or an emergency need, an emergency is really defined as a life-threatening situation, a heart attack, you lose a limb from, cutting a tree with a chainsaw and cut your arm off. You got a real emergency. You would go to the ER, and that would be here locally. And then if you're traveling outside of the network, so you think about networks for HMOs, usually they're regional based. So you would have like within a 60-mile radius of the metro area or county that you live in, sometimes will be a network, or it'll be an HMO that's kind of statewide. So specifically, each plan can vary, and if you have an educated licensed agent that you're dealing with, like us, our agency understands how those plans work and what the network restrictions are, or if there is restrictions when it comes to state or in a regional area. So understand that. But in a situation with emergency or urgent care, you're always going to be covered locally. Right now, we're seeing a lot of the plans that have about $130 copay for an ER visit, roughly plus or minus a few dollars, or around about a $30 copay for an urgent care. So what that means, if you're traveling to Florida, you're on vacation, you have an emergency down there, you can go to the ER, you would pay an ER copay of $130, and or if you went to an urgent care, you would pay a $30 copay if that's the copay allocated on your plan. Now, understand this, if you go to an ER and you're having a heart attack and you're admitted to the hospital through the ER, in almost every Medicare Advantage situation, that ER copay of $130, as an example, would be waived, and you'd be subject to your hospitalization inpatient hospital. So if your inpatient hospital copay is $250 or $300, then you would pay that up to day 5 or day 6. So if you stayed 3 days and they release you, you're going to have 3 days times your inpatient copay minus the ER copay. Because you came into the hospital through the ER, you would not pay the ER copay. It's waived, and then you would pay the inpatient copay. And now, urgent care is the same way. If you go to the urgent care and you don't realize you're having a heart attack, but they diagnose you to be having a heart attack and rush you over to the hospital and put you into inpatient for surgery right away, that urgent care copay of $30 would be waived as well. So a couple other great things to remember about HMO Medicare Advantage plans. So one, metro areas, metro networked areas, HMOs typically are going to be a great fit. Outside of the United States or in other states, again, just remember if you're in Florida, California, you're visiting family, if you have an emergency or an ER need, go to the closest emergency room. You can be seen anywhere in the U.S. Urgent care works the same way. Urgent care is either a walk-in clinic or an urgent care facility. Usually you can look those up, find one, and get access. Now, keep in mind, your Medicare Advantage plan more than likely has what's now being called as like telehealth services, and those are urgent care calls that you can call in. And on most Medicare Advantage plans, it's zero, or it may be the primary care copay cost or a specialist copay cost based on your plan. So if you're in an area and you have a sinus infection, and you know, like you have chronic sinusitis, and once you have that sinus infection coming on, you know, if you don't get on an antibiotic within a few days, that's going to turn into a chronic sinus infection that's going to create a lot of issues for you. And you're on vacation, you can call in through your telehealth service with your Medicare Advantage plan. If it has that, understand how to use that, you can actually call in. I often say, my wife and I share this example with clients all the time. Jennifer and I have a telehealth service through our health insurance. Now, I'm not on Medicare and she isn't either, but we use that service all the time. It used to be a zero copay, and now it's a small copay cost. So it's cheaper for us to do that because it doesn't break up and fragment going and having access to a doctor's visit or an urgent care. It takes a lot of time. So keep that in mind, that your telehealth service is there for HMO and PPO plans. Now, outside of the United States, what happens with an HMO plan and really with a PPO plan as well? We're going to talk about PPO in network and out of network in just a second, and the important things you need to know about traveling with that PPO plan. So stick around for just a minute as I go into that next. But with the HMO or PPO beyond the U.S. borders, keep in mind that most plans are limited up to a $50,000 coverage maximum. That means if you go overseas and you have an emergency and you're hospitalized for a heart attack, you typically are going to be subject to their deductibles and however their medical system works in billing. Usually you're going to be paying out of pocket for service. They do not look at Medicare. It stops at the border, and they don't have Medicare in another country. Therefore, what is the most important thing for you to do if you travel outside of the United States? Make sure you have travel insurance. That's something that we have a brokerage link that we use to be able to broker out travel insurance, or you can call your property and casualty that does your homeowner's insurance and typically get a reasonable cost for a travel policy from $50 to $70. So what is this going to do with the travel insurance? When you go out of seas and you do have an emergency, then you can file it with the travel insurance. It's going to pay you out quickly to get reimbursed. So typically overseas, you're going to be subject to that country's medical process. So if you're having to pay a deductible, we've had a client before, they got on a cruise ship after having a sea-doo accident. The wife and husband were severely injured, broke his arm, did some crazy things to him and then also to her. They get back onto the cruise ship that they're taking the cruise with, and to see a doctor, they have to pay a $1,500 deposit. So they didn't have cash. They had to use a credit card, and then they ended up being charged some other fees, like $300 or $400. They brought those back into the state and filed them with the carrier. And they were on an HMO Medicare Advantage plan that I actually had put them on. And it took them about 3 months to have those bills reconciled. So ER, urgent care, or inpatient hospitals, how they're going to typically bill that based on what did you have done. And then if you were doing like outpatient overseas because you broke an arm, they have to go through this billing process and kind of figure out the codes and then process it through. Where you could bring that back and turn it into your travel insurance, is going to insure well over $50,000 limit. And you're not going to be at risk for this situation I had this year with one of our clients. I'm going to tell the story that you don't want to be stuck with. So I had another client that's part of our agency. One of our employed agents has had this client for some time. She went on a cruise with family and friends, got sick on the cruise, began to have a heart attack. She was off the ship. I communicated with the friends. They took her to the hospital. And then the cruise ship, understand when they port, that port, they're leaving at a set time. So she had a heart attack and was going to have a procedure done and stay there. She was immobile. She had to stay at the hospital. The friends had to get back on the ship, and they left to go to a different port. Now, she was cared for over about 3 to 5 days and incapacitated and had a surgery and all kinds of process. But then trying to get out of that country back to the US and then back to the ship, there's a whole moving parts there. And there were several thousands of dollars worth of medical bills that she was faced with. And again, she did not have travel insurance. So when she came back in here, one, she's probably never going to do a cruise again because of the quality of care that she received through the cruise line was not good. She got just dumped in another country and nobody stayed with her. There was no liaison. She woke up after surgery or after a procedure being done with nobody speaking English. I mean, very traumatic, PTSD to the core. So just be mindful that if you're going and traveling, that you keep in mind that it's very important for you to be insured beyond the US with travel insurance, and know that if you don't do that, that once you get care there, you have to bring it back, submit it, and then process through. Now we're going to go into a PPO and exactly how a PPO works in the US. Just to understand in-network and out-of-network, and then how does the ER cost work, and how does the copay cost for urgent care. But most importantly, what we're going to cover is the hospitalization, which you may not be aware of, that it could cost you thousands of dollars. Stick around. All right, so HMO, we've explained. PPO. PPO has in-network and out-of-network. In metro area, Nashville, again, if we're in a 60-mile radius, typically people are coming in and converging into a primary specialist or a hospital. And a lot of times what people will think is, hey, I'm going to do a PPO plan because I'm going to this doctor that's out of network, but I pay a little bit more copay. So a PPO plan allows you an in-network copay, which let's just say if the primary is $0 and the out-of-network copay for a primary is $10, they'd pay $10 for a primary care doctor. So specialist is going to be a little bit higher as well. And then hospitalization. So hospitalization is where we really get into the sticky area outside of the network. Let's say if you're traveling and you are going somewhere to stay and you have a PPO plan, you're like, hey, I'm there and I'm going to get care while I'm there because I can see an out-of-network doctor and I live there for 4 months out of the year and then I come back. And then while I'm there, they issue you to have a surgery. And it's not an ER situation, but you go into the hospital not thinking like, hey, I've got inpatient I've done in the state that I live in Middle Tennessee. I've gone to Nashville, I've gone to St. Thomas or wherever it may be, Vanderbilt, had a surgery done, and I paid the $250 or $300 copay. Is usually what a copay is going to be for hospitalization in network with a PPO plan in our market in the Middle Tennessee area. So let's just say it's $300 and you went in for 2 days and you came out and you paid $600 and it was $150 worth of services and surgery and doctors and cost, but you only paid $600. Well, you're out of network now. Your doctor is saying, hey, you have to have this emergency surgery done. I'm going to go ahead and admit you to the hospital. You go over to the hospital through admittance. You don't go through the ER, you go into the hospital and you're out of network. That doctor, that hospital is not part of the network in the area that you live in. So anything outside of the area that you live in is considered a lot of times out of network, unless you're in a national network plan. So United Healthcare, some other carriers will have what they call national network. If they're in network with a doctor in another state, it's considered the same copay. And then like PPO plans, like Devoted Health has a PPO plan that's called open access. That means if you pay a copay here of $200 or $300 a day, day 1 through 5 for hospitalization, and you go to a hospital that will accept the plan's terms and conditions in another state, your open access means the copay, it doesn't have a higher out-of-pocket, out-of-network copay. But traditional out-of-network situations like I'm explaining is you go to the hospital, you go through the surgery, everything works out, you get out, and then all of a sudden you get a bill billed based on the out-of-network hospital, which can be a higher copay cost per day or a percentage of 30 or 40% of that cost up to the max out of pocket. And we have seen people a lot of times in PPO plans hit their max out of pocket because they didn't understand how to really use the out-of-network function of their plan. So you just need to make sure, just because you're on a PPO plan and you have some flexibility, you think, well, what happens in that flexibility, it actually can cost you more money and more headache. So understand that if you are going out of network and living maybe at a Florida condo and staying on the beach and you're just going to stay on your PPO plan, make sure you understand how it's going to be billed with the hospital system that's near you in case you do have an emergency or a situation like this. It's a medical situation where you need to have a surgery and you're referred over to a hospital. Make sure, are they going to bill in network? Are they going to bill out of network? And what is your out of network risk and cost when you are traveling? It's very important to understand the HMO, PPO, and again, out of the US. Make sure you get travel insurance. I'm going to be back in just a second and cover how Medicare supplements work and the important details of traveling with the supplement. So let's dive into a Medicare supplement. Here's a great thing about a Medicare supplement. If the doctor, hospital, specialist, or any access of care when it comes to Part A and Part B services, if they accept the terms and conditions of original Medicare, or they are contracted with Medicare or accepting Medicare bill payment, then guess what? Your supplement's going to come behind and pick up the additional deductibles and co-insurance. So to standardize this, a Plan F, for those that were born prior to January 1st of 2020 that are still on a Plan F, 100% of everything covered. Part A deductible, Part B deductible, and the 20% that Medicare doesn't cover for Part B or outpatient services. And then most of the time we're talking to people that are born 65 years of age from January 1st of 2020 and beyond. They're not able to enroll into a Plan F, even though a Plan F has not been done away with. And with people that are older that are losing like an employer plan that's 84 years of age, they have to be a guaranteed issue into a Plan F. So there's a situation where the Plan F is still applicable, but the Plan G, what happens as far as travel and things like that for a Plan G or Plan N, or if you're doing a high deductible Plan G, you're going to have access to any doctor, any specialist, any hospitals that accepts the terms and conditions of Medicare or contracted with Medicare. So you're going to have open access to basically go to almost anybody unless they are like an MD VIP type doctor where you pay a service per month and they don't bill any insurance. You're going to be pretty much taken care of. Now, what happens as you branch out into other countries, and exactly how does your original Medicare and the Medicare supplement work? Well, one, you're going to meet a $250 deductible when you go outside of the United States with original Medicare. Again, you're subject to the country you're in. You may have to pay deductibles and costs to access care there. But once you come back and file it with Medicare and your Medicare supplement, the supplement's going to require you to pay a $250 deductible. Then they're going to cover 80% of the cost up to a $50,000 plan max. So your supplement is limited on exactly what can it cost in situations where, you have a life-threatening illness or a chronic condition, a heart failure situation, and they're having to life flight you back in for several hours in on a helicopter or a plane, medical emergencies like that. Again, I would say go ahead and buy travel insurance for a small premium, and it covers your trip, and usually it's insuring for several $100,000, if not $1 million worth of medical coverage. You're eliminating yourself from this risk and the encumbrance of having to come back into the States and figure out how to get Medicare to be able to pay or Medicare supplement to be able to pay. So keep in mind, when you go outside the United States with a Medicare supplement, inside of the States, you're covered. You're going to be able to go to almost any doctor, any hospital that accepts Medicare. The supplement will come behind. Outside of the U.S., you need to watch yourself because you're subject to the Part B deductible for foreign travel, $250. 80% is going to be covered by the supplement, leaving you 20% up to a $50,000 plan max on your Medicare supplement. That's pretty much the standardized process. And then again, coming back to finalizing exactly the final point on what kind of travel insurance and what do you need to keep in mind when you are traveling. Stick around, I'll be back in just a second to conclude. So, which plan is best for you when traveling, a Medicare Advantage or Medicare Supplement? Well, both of them have their benefits if you understand how to be able to use the plan, and understand when you're with a Medicare Advantage plan, you have access to emergency rooms and urgent care and walk-in clinics outside of your coverage area, and there's no restrictions to deny you coverage and care for emergency or urgent care. So understand that you can go other places. Understand with a PPO Medicare Advantage plan, if you're traveling and staying somewhere and you're going to access getting medical services done, you're probably going to be subject to out-of-pocket maximums, and it can be as high as 30 or 40% of the billable rate up to the max out-of-pocket. So the max out-of-pocket on a PPO plan a lot of times is going to be $7,000, $8,000, $10,000, and you can be subject to. So 30 or 40% of high-cost medical hospitalization visits and things like that can ramp up to hit your max out-of-pocket. So just be mindful of that outside of your coverage area, and be mindful that inside of your coverage area, just because you're on a PPO doesn't always mean doctors that you're going to are going to accept the terms and conditions and payment of that Medicare Advantage plan. So ask the doctor before you go and assume, and assuming wrong will mean, hey, we don't take your insurance, and you've changed into a PPO plan for the flexibility of the network, and it doesn't always mean you have flexibility. Now, Medicare supplements, the most key important thing is if they accept terms and conditions of Medicare, then you're going to be covered in the U.S. Outside the United States, just keep in mind that it's only going to cover up to a $50,000 plan limit. You're going to pay a little bit of money, a percentage amount, and then up to $50,000. So what is the resolve for all of these plans? Making sure that when you travel outside of the United States, to have travel insurance, be insured, eliminate your liability for a little bit out of pocket. If you have additional questions, guys, you can always reach out to our office. We have a link that you can actually self-insure yourself for traveling. And then also, we always say, if you need more hand-holding through the travel process and travel insurance, reach out to your property and casualty carrier that's doing your homeowners, and usually they specialize in different lines of property and casualty. If you do have any questions about exactly how's your coverage working and things are changing in the Medicare space, guys, reach out or click below, schedule a time. We'd love to be able to help and walk you through to make your life easy by making Medicare simple. Until next time, I'll see you on the other side.